Another year, no playoff success for the Calgary Flames. For the seventh time in the last 10 years, the Calgary Flames will not be in the playoffs. What's going on with this organization? Let's have a real talk about the Calgary Flames on Agree or Disagree, the podcast. Welcome to Agree or Disagree, the podcast, the controversial podcast that pushes you to think differently and connects you with your community. We meet every Wednesdays and Thursdays. You can find me on Spreaker.com, Kevole, Podbean, Kevin Olenick. You can also follow me on Twitter at Kevole. You can like, agree, or disagree the podcast on Facebook. Find me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenick. Instagram at Kevole. YouTube, Kevin Olenick. Soundcloud.com, Kevole. And Patreon, Kevole. As mentioned, for the seventh time in the last 10 years, the Calgary Flames will not be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It will be the third straight season that the Flames will actually not have a playoff victory. The last one, of course, was 2015 when they won 4 games against the Vancouver Canucks and, of course, a game against the Anaheim Ducks. The difference this year, maybe than other years, is the expectations were quite high. They got a goalie, Mike Smith. They got a defenseman, Travis Hamonic. There was a sense that this team would bring some success. This team would be on the up and up. They could win a couple of rounds. Maybe, just maybe, there would be a Battle of Alberta playoff, which we have not seen in over 20 years. They did get off to a slow start, but they were okay. They were hanging in there. They were in the playoff chase until February 11th with 1.1 second to go. Mike Smith hurt his groin. He was out for a month. The team went down and subsequently collapsed. Or as many Flames haters would say, and as a word that has been used more than once about the Calgary Flames for those who do not like the Flames, choke. Can we just be very honest here, Flame fans? I have been a Flames fan. I have been a follower of the Flames as long as I have been alive. But the success of this Flames team has been downright terrible. Terrible. Let's be honest here. You may respond, well, we have 3 Cup finalist appearances. We have the Stanley Cup Championship in 1989. We had the controversial goal in 2004. That didn't count. But let's have a real hard look at what has happened here. 1986, we did advance to the Stanley Cup for the first time. We lost to the Montreal Canadiens. In the second round of that playoff, Steve Smith accidentally knocked the puck into his own net in Game 7 that allowed the Calgary Flames to advance over the Edmonton Oilers. 1989, that was the year we won the Cup. That was the year before, by the way, was 1988. The Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames were considered the 2 best teams in the National Hockey League. The Flames were first, the Oilers were second, the Flames were considered the favorite. This would be the year that the Cup would come to Calgary. The Oilers annihilated them. Like, it wasn't close. It was a 4-0 series win where the Oilers completely dominated from pillar to post. That year, also 1988, was the year that Wayne Gretzky was traded from the Edmonton Oilers to the Los Angeles Kings. The unthinkable trade happened. That was also the year, 1989, where the Calgary Flames finished 43 points ahead of the Vancouver Canucks. And in Game 7 of the first round of the Stanley Cup Final, in overtime, Joel Otto scores, and a puck that you could argue was kicked into the net. Late in the it was kicked in. Let's be honest. If that goal was now, they were under review, that goal wouldn't have counted. But the Flames ended up winning the Stanley Cup that year. Then, 15 years of not only no playoff series wins, no playoffs. 8 of those seasons, no playoffs. 8 of 15, no playoffs. Then we advanced to 2004. 7-game series against those pesky Vancouver Canucks in the playoffs. Martin Gelinas scores an overtime in Game 7, power play goal. If you also remember, that was also the year that Todd Bertuzzi got suspended late in the season for his incident against Steve Moore. He was done for the rest of the hockey season. And their number one goaltender, Dan Cloutier, who you may or may not think was a great goalie, was also injured. And let's not forget the second round of that playoff. Steve Yzerman, one of the greatest players to ever play this game and one of the greatest representatives and ambassadors of this game, was also injured. Then nothing for 2006 to 2009, first round exits. 2010, 2014, 4 straight years, no playoffs. Then, as mentioned, 2015, 6-game series, beat the Canucks. That year was the year Ryan Miller got hurt and missed most of that series. And when he came back in Game 6, he was nowhere near 100%. So, but yes, the Flames advanced, moved on to the second round, and lost in 5 games to the Anaheim Ducks. That team, by the way, was not a good team. Like, honestly. So let's look at this really. In 32 seasons of NHL hockey in the Calgary Flames, were it not for a bounce off a stick, a trade, an unthinkable trade, a bad call that would have been reviewed, and some dramatic injuries and a suspension, the Calgary Flames would have 2 playoff series wins in over 32 years. I'm going to say that again. The Calgary Flames would have 2 playoff series wins in over 32 years. I'm going to say this, and again, I remind you that I grew up as a Calgary Flames fan, as a Calgary Flames follower. You could argue that this is one of the worst organizations in the National Hockey League, maybe pro sports. If you don't want to argue that they're the worst, we can have a discussion about how interesting they are, because quite frankly, they might be one of the most boring. Can you name over the years how many great Flames there were? There were some good players here that played in Calgary over the years. I'm not going to dispute that. Al MacInnis was a Hall of Famer. Yes, Gary Suter, Mike Vernon, some good guys. We had some good character guys here, the players here. Jarome Iginla probably is the one guy that you could say arguably moves the needle. And when you think of the Calgary Flames, you can think of Jarome Iginla. Probably the greatest one. But that's it, really. Theron Fleury, maybe. Johnny Gaudreau could get there, maybe. Lanny McDonald and his mustache, quite possibly, was certainly a character that people remember. There's always been some good players here. I'm not saying that there's never been any good players, but the type of player, the player that moves the needle, the player that when you're in part of the Calgary Flames comes to the opposition arena, you want to go and see. There's 2, really. Jarome Iginla and then maybe Mika Kiprusoff. Those are the 2 players in the Calgary Flames history that has moved the needle over time. Legitimately, you think of them, that's it. And it's entirely possible that Johnny Gaudreau will get there, but I don't think he's quite that guy now. I don't see it yet. Maybe. A little too young. Let's look at the coaching over the years. We've had Badger Bob Johnson, who arguably is a legend and probably the greatest coach that the Flames have ever had. Terry Crisp won the Stanley Cup, but never really had much success after that. Darryl Sutter got the team to the Cup in 2004. Pretty good. Mike Keenan for a couple years. We'll get to him a little bit later in this conversation. But there's also been some pretty bad names here. Pierre Pagé, Al McNeil, Guy Charron, Don Hay, Greg Gilbert. Some interesting names over the years of not the greatest of coaches. And then general managers, you kind of think of it. There's only really one that I can say would be legendary Hall of Fame worthy. Cliff Fletcher probably would be a Hall of Fame guy. And probably had the most success with the Flames. Darryl Sutter, yes. Okay, sure. Other than that, Doug Risebrough made probably one of the worst trades in National Hockey League history when he traded Doug Gilmour, who moved the needle, but he moved the needle more with the Leafs than he did with the Flames. When he traded Gilmour to the Leafs, one of the worst trades, as I mentioned. So this team has had a history of bad decisions, bad draft picks, bad coaching, bad general manager, a bounce or two here. This could be an unmitigated disaster. We laugh at the Edmonton Oilers, but at least people will go see the Edmonton Oilers because of Connor McDavid. The rest of the team isn't very good right now, but Connor McDavid is there, and they'll shell out the money to see Connor McDavid. You can also laugh at the Vancouver Canucks all you want because they've never won a Stanley Cup, but this is the worst time that they've ever had in terms of unappearing in the playoffs for the last 5 years. They've been a playoff team pretty consistently over their time. They just haven't won the elusive Stanley Cup. And they've had as many final appearances, by the way, as the Calgary Flames. They just didn't win that one game. But 3 finals, there you go. And then, so as we end the season here, as we hear, the Flames were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs as of Monday. We head into another game here Thursday against the Columbus Blue Jackets. We are just finishing up the season, and we're going through the autopsy again here, as we normally do with the Calgary Flames. You know, what do we do with the coach? Is Glenn Gulletson back? What do we do with the general manager? Which players do we trade? What will we draft? It's the same thing over and over again. So the Flames' final games, by the way, just so you know, are Columbus, Edmonton, Arizona coming in here. And then they finish, then they also have the Golden Knights and then the Winnipeg Jets. So they have 5 games to go, 4 at home. And there will be scrutiny on the players again. There will be scrutiny, as I said, on the coach. And there will be scrutiny on the general manager. But yet somehow, in the midst of all of this, in the over 30 years of this organization, and yes, there's been some different ones, but there's been a group of people that have found a way to run, hide, and duck from the media. They don't answer any questions. They don't face any music. They seem to be under some secret code that we can't actually talk to them. And it's the ownership of this group. And as much as we want to start pointing fingers at this guy, that guy, and this guy, I think it's fair game now to start asking some serious questions about the ownership group of the Calgary Flames. Now, you may think that this is an ownership group that is a hands-off group. They're not really involved in the hockey decisions. They let the hockey people be hockey. They do them, and they just do their ownership. They make their checks, they pay the checks, they pay the bills. They're like, hey, you do hockey. I'm going to take you back to an article back then in 2012. It was an article on sportsnet.ca. And the title of this article, interesting enough, is Many Problems Within the Flames Organization. Sound familiar? It's probably a motto of the Calgary Flames. And this is from Mike Keaton, who was a Sportsnet analyst, former coach of the Flames, coached, of course, 2 seasons with the Flames, 2007, 2008, 2008, 2009. Here are some things he talked about. He said that there were some disconnects in the dressing room. That might also sound familiar. We can dig into that maybe another time. Sure. But the quote I want to catch your attention to here is this. We went up against a healthy Chicago Blackhawks team that year, and I was fired. And they were a very good team. They went on to win the Stanley Cup. They had no injuries, they being the Blackhawks. We had a plethora of injuries. Regier and Giordano didn't play, Phaneuf breaks his ribs, and Corey Sarich had a broken foot. When I went in there to talk to then General Manager Daryl Sutter when he fired me, he said if you didn't have those injuries, you'd still be coaching. So I asked, why are you firing me? And he said, I'm not firing you. The owners are firing you. This ownership group has had more to do with this personnel decisions and who's been in this, the GM chair, the coach chair, the player chair, than we have cared to admit. They've gained the respect, by the way, of the National Hockey League and have been influential into things that are going on. But they don't seem to be held to any sort of real account. They haven't really paid for a general manager. Not really. They haven't really paid for a great coach. Not really. They live in a secret silo here. No decision goes past them. Let's be honest. And yet year after year after year after year, they have found a fall guy to take the heat. When it's time to answer questions, there seems to be silence. Or they'll bring in somebody else. They'll bring in a Brian Burke, who comes in with his non-tying tie, provides some witty quote, some angry quote, and puts you all at ease, and you think everything is okay. But what about when there's an arena that needed to be built? A time when probably it's one of the most important times that as owners, you would think it would be a time that we would hear from them. It's a time of negotiation between them and the city. You would think, this is the time. This is it. If there's ever going to be a time that we're going to hear from the owners, this would be it, right? You would think that, right? Right?
I'm wondering why the 5 people who are the billionaires and millionaires aren't just paying for it themselves.
It doesn't work.
Wait a minute. That's not an owner. That's Flames president guy Ken King.
The mayor made a comment this morning about he doesn't understand the small markets. Okay, we're sold out. We've been sold out forever. We're going to be sold out forever onward. 1.5 million market, and the best example is Edmonton, because I'm telling you, nobody in Edmonton is sitting in that beautiful new Rogers Place unless the deal that they put through, which was fostered and driven and argued and debated for a long time.
Yeah. Anyway, let's just move on here. There is Ken King, waxing silhouettely, waxing eloquence to the masses about what needs to happen to get an arena. Waxing soliloquy to taxpayers who, Flames fans or not, are going to be expected to foot a bill to a new arena. No ownership. They're on vacation. This ownership group, by the way, which consists of Murray Edwards, Alvin Libben, Clayton Riddle, Alan Martin, Jeffrey McKay, are an estimated worth of $2.2 billion US. 2 of these owners, by the way, are on the 2015 Forbes billionaire list. In a time where it would be really nice and really important to hear from ownership, send Ken King to answer questions about the future of this team. Whether or not they're going to be a new arena, how are we going to negotiate for a new arena? They're not there. We're going to send Ken King out to answer those questions. Then they send Ken King to write open letters to the public. They send Ken King around media tours to not threaten, because, we don't want to threaten. Because if we're not valuable, we'll just leave. But threaten to move a team. They don't answer to this public. They just expect the public to go in and turn in their turnstiles and pay their tickets, buy their jerseys, and smile and say, "Go Flames, go home," and everything is the same. They think, quite frankly, you should worship them. Really. They're nice billionaires, folks. I mean, they give to charity and stuff. It's not their fault. We really should be thanking them in Calgary for having a hockey team, quite frankly. If it wasn't for them, there would not be a team in Calgary, folks. There would be nothing. Be grateful to us, as owners, as to your existence. You wouldn't be able to help human beings in need for charity if it wasn't for us as owners. That new library is because of us as owners. You wouldn't have a paycheck if it wasn't for us as owners. We employ most of you, my God. The sun comes up and it's because of us here as owners. It could be worse, Calgary. You could not have a hockey team. That could possibly happen. Doesn't that seem sickening and condescending and a speak of the culture of what this team has been for the last 30 years? It's been okay. Meh. We don't really care. The fans are coming. We don't care. They're going to pay their seats. We're going to sell out. The fans love hockey. Nothing's going to change. Well, we'll need a new arena. But we're not really going to be there. Not really there for that Calgary public that we pretend so nicely to like. The Calgary public, Flames fan or not, I think, this needs to be said, has put hard-earned money to support this hockey team in many different ways. Not only by attending games, not only by watching games and going to the bar, by participating in a number of different ways. To put money in the pockets of some of the richest people in the world. I mean, Forbes billionaire rich people. And yet they hide behind PR spin, buzzwords, a knowing smile here and there, waxing of elegance, and not being held to account of how this team has performed and how this team has been for over 30 years. Flames fans, for the next 4 games, I have a question for you. What are you going to do about this? This is an opportunity to stop the mediocrity. This is a team that demanded you to pay for a new arena, really. I mean, hell, let's get real here. They allow Bill Smith to campaign and have campaign signs in an arena. They campaigned and with Gary Bettman, pretty much. They didn't campaign, but they kind of did against Mayor Nenshi. And I was critical of Mayor Nenshi at the beginning of this, and, you know, this whole arena thing is a mess. Flames fans and Calgary public, what are you really going to do about this ownership group? What message do you want to say? I know from hearing from Twitter and from reading chats and listening to call-in shows on the radio that the Flame fan base is angry. And they have every right to be. This season can only be described as a disaster. An unmitigated disaster. That this team is not going to be in the playoffs. And not only that, by the way, they don't have their first round pick, which is basically going to be a lottery pick, a pretty high-ish round draft pick. They don't have a second round pick. They don't have a third round pick. And we didn't even get into the trades part of this, but that's for another discussion for another time, which we'll leave when Fireside Podcast comes in and we have that. But this ownership group is demanding you to forward a tax bill, fan or not, for a new arena. And yet, the quality of this team over the years has been one of incompetence, mediocrity, boredom, and really uninteresting. I think it's time for Flames fans to start demanding a change. There'll be a change of coach probably. There may be a change of GM. There may be a change of face here and there. But the core of this team, where it all starts at the top, is the ownership. And that hasn't changed. And that behavior hasn't changed. And it's time for the Flames fans to send a message to this ownership in some way, shape, or form that this incompetence, mediocrity, and boring team is enough. It's time for a change. What do you think? What do you think about the owners? Tell me a little bit more. Let me know. Again, facebook.com. Follow me on Facebook, Like Agree or Disagree the Podcast on Facebook. Add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenick. You can follow me on Twitter at KEVOLE, Soundcloud.com, KEVOLE, Spreaker.com, KEVOLE, Instagram, YouTube, Podbean, Patreon, and more. Thanks for listening to Agree or Disagree the Podcast. My name again is Kevin Olenick. We will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.